Into the conversation, our friend, legal analyst Neama Rahmani, who's been guiding us through all the days of jury selection here. He joins me. Neama, good to see you. I know we were off yesterday. Court back on today. 12 jurors, all permanent jurors, selected and seated today. So, Neama, we're going to talk about them. Before we do that, we want to get to know them, not who they are, not their names, but some of their demographic profiles, so to speak here. And I want to put up some of these slides that we have made. So, juror number one is a male from West Harlem who's originally from Ireland, has no children, and enjoys anything outdoorsy. Gets their news from the New York Times, the Daily Mail, Fox News, and MSNBC. Now, juror number two is a female from the Upper East Side. She's a native New Yorker. She's an oncology nurse at Memorial Sloan Kettering. She's engaged. She has no children, and she enjoys spending time with family, friends, her dog, and she gets her news from the New York Times and Google. Juror number three is a male from Chelsea, originally from Oregon, has been an attorney for 5 years, practices corporate law, enjoys hiking and running, and gets his news from the New York Times and Google. Juror number four is a male from the Lower East Side who was born in Puerto Rico, is married, has one child, also 2 grandchildren, and works as an IT consultant, volunteers at nonprofits. He says his hobby is his family, and gets his news from the New York Daily News, the New York Times, and Google. Juror number five is a female from Harlem who's a native New Yorker. She's not married. She has no children. She has a master's in education. She works at a school, and she enjoys photography. She describes herself as creative at heart. She gets her news from Google, TikTok, talk radio as well. Juror number six is a female from Chelsea. She's a native New Yorker. She's a software engineer, and she works for the Walt Disney Company, and she likes to dance. Juror number seven is a male from the Upper East Side. He's originally from North Carolina. He's married with 2 children. He's a civil litigation attorney, and he likes to spend time outdoors with his kids, and he gets his news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and the Washington Post. Juror number eight is a male from the Upper East Side who's originally from Lebanon. He's married and has 2 children. He's a retired wealth manager and a current consultant. He likes to ski, do yoga, and meditate, and he gets his news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and the BBC. And juror number nine, she's a female who lives on the Upper East Side. She's originally from New Jersey. She's single with no children. She's a speech therapist for the New York City Department of Education. She likes to be with friends and dine out and go for walks, and gets her news from CNN and the New York Times. Juror number 10 is a male who lives in Murray Hill, that's a neighborhood in New York, who's originally from Ohio. He's single with no children. He works in commerce. He likes the outdoors and animals, and he says he does not follow the news. Juror number 11 is a female who lives in Manhattan, originally from California, is single, likes to travel, and watches the late-night news programs. And finally, juror number 12 is a female who lives on the Upper East Side and it previously has lived in Minnesota, South Carolina, and North Carolina. She's married with no children. She's a physical therapist. She likes running, tennis, and live music. And there she reads the Times, USA Today, and CNN, watches CNN as well. We also have one jury alternate who's a female who lives on the Upper East Side. She grew up in England and Hong Kong. She never married. She has no children, and she is an investment manager. So, Neama, that was 13 individuals to go through, but I want to get your thoughts because the judge in all of this, Juan Merchan, he took the media to task today, somewhat admonishing them for kind of divulging some of these details about the jurors. Erica Orden with Politico, who covers all things courts, quoted Merchan today in court, Neama. Merchan said this: "I'm directing that the press simply apply common sense and refrain from simply writing about anything that involves physical descriptions about jurors." All that information we just read out, though, was in the court today, in the court of the public press there. Neama.
Well, I have to disagree with the judge here. The judge is upset because people are able to identify the jurors. But really, if you ask people, what's your current job and what's your previous job, don't you think people can Google, especially if you work for a small company, and find out who worked or currently works for those 2 companies? I mean, this is something that should have been self-explanatory. If you want to protect jurors' identities and you don't want to keep them anonymous or sequester them. Don't ask questions that are going to be able to identify them. Look, our courts in this country, they are open to the public and to the press. This is the most, probably what would have been the most watched trial in American history. The judge allowed it to be televised, but it's not. So you can't blame the press from reporting on this historic trial and who's going to decide Donald Trump's fate.
So, Neama, it seems like it's your view that Merchan was out of line here with that admonishment.
Oh, I think he's way out of line. Nothing I've seen has identified the jurors more than the court already has. And to the extent we're talking about physical characteristics, it's just been white, black, Middle Eastern, that type of thing. So nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that I haven't seen in every other trial that's been live streamed on the various networks every day in this country.
So I got to bring up one of the jurors who was dismissed, who said her family and friends were kind of catching on to some of the media's speculation about who these members of the jury are and the information that was presented, like we just did here. She has some pretty smart family members and friends. I mean, to kind of put those two and two together, would you say? I mean, there's millions of people in Manhattan, and for her to say, my friends kind of caught on to it, my family kind of caught on to it, they were asking me if I'm one of them. I mean, that's quite something.
It is, but look, if you're going to serve as a juror in this case, you need to be prepared at some point that your identity may be revealed. It's just not realistic, right? This is going to serve for 6 to 8 weeks. And look, there are some jurors that may absolutely want to get on this jury. Stealth jurors, they may want to write a book about this and go on a media tour. But if you're going to serve on this jury with the expectation that you're going to remain anonymous through your entire life, I don't think that is a guarantee. It is not realistic. So if you're scared and you're unwilling to serve, it's just time for you to tell the judge and stop the process now, as opposed to there being a disruption in the middle of the trial.
Yeah, I mean, Neama, at the outset of the day, this process took 2 steps back. Now it took, 10 steps forward. We have a full jury here. But were you concerned? Was this on shaky ground this morning? Or is that just de rigueur standard for these jury selection processes that, jurors who are picked, they get dismissed sometimes right afterward? That's normal or not?
I was concerned because sometimes you see these one domino after another, then all the jurors want to get off. That's why if I'm Judge Merchan in this case, I ask the jurors, look, is there any reason you don't want to be here? Any reason you're afraid to serve? That you just don't want to have anything to do with the case? And if someone raises their hand, you should allow them to go. Jury service is already a burden. Now you're talking about probably a 2-month burden, and that's a lot for a lot of people, whether it's a financial hardship or otherwise. So if you're the judge, you got to give the potential jurors an out, have them sit on some other type of case, a shorter case, maybe a week or so.
So with some of these juror profiles that we brought to the viewer and the fact that there were 2 jury dismissals today, do you think eventually and hypothetically that might jeopardize the prosecution if we get to the appellate level? I'm always kind of leaping ahead with you, Neama, to an eventual appellate process here, but you don't think anything that happened with the juror dismissals or when you see some of these jury profiles that could have a factor into the appellate process?
Not any of the jurors except maybe one. And there's 3 jurors I want to talk about, Andrew.
Okay.
Juror number 3, corporate lawyer. Juror number 7, the civil litigator. Having lawyers on your panel, Andrew, is a very risky proposition. They can really take over the entire deliberation. So if you're the prosecution here, you want people that are going to be unremarkable jurors. And I say this respectfully. Most of the jurors, they're unremarkable. They're not someone that is going to necessarily hang the panel or try to take over the deliberations from what I've seen so far. But attorneys like me, we tend to be know-it-alls, and we have a difficult time in a legal setting being one of 12 folks who are deliberating. So the prosecution has to be very sure about those 2 jurors, especially when their case is really on shaky legal grounds. I mean, you're arguing that the false business records were in furtherance of a campaign finance violation or a cover up an illegal expenditure. That's something that a lawyer may take a look at and have an issue with. And so those 2 jurors are risky for the prosecution. Oh. But Andrew, I really want to talk about juror number 11.
Oh, okay.
The defense, they ran out of strikes, right? And this juror got up there and said that she does not like Donald Trump's persona and that she thinks he's selfish. Now, the defense tried to get her excused for cause. The judge denied that motion. And now she's on the panel because the defense ran out of peremptory strikes. So I know that's someone that Donald Trump is not happy with. I think he went on social media and talked about liberal jurors that got on the panel. And I mean, here's someone from my home state of California. I don't think Trump and his lawyers were happy with this particular juror, but they were unable to convince the judge to remove her for cause. So they were stuck with her.
So, Neama, you know, we heard from former President Trump when all the proceedings were said and done today, and he had like a stack of paper this thick of articles that he was reading the headlines of to the press gathered there, articles that he said were critical of the entire process, were critical of the trial and the case itself. We're going to show our viewers that after we're done speaking with you. But doesn't Trump just open himself up to some of this criticism, to the possibility that he's going to be held in contempt for violating the gag order? Why does he keep doing this? I know he's Trump, but are you surprised still at this stage at outspoken he is?
Andrew, I am, but you think I've been covering Donald Trump on shows like this for so many years, I wouldn't be surprised, but I still am. I mean, I can't believe some of the things that he says. But listen, it works in the political world, but in the legal world, you know, upsetting the judge, upsetting the jurors who are going to decide your fate, criticizing them, it's not a good legal strategy. That's why he's lost 3 consecutive cases there in New York. May be great politically, and Donald Trump may be riding this trial on the way to the White House, but I don't think it's a good legal strategy here, Andrew.
All right, let's look ahead to tomorrow and to Monday. Last time you and I spoke, Neama, on Tuesday, Judge Juan Merchan was somewhat optimistic that opening arguments could begin on Monday. Does he still have that optimism? And do we think we're going to get oral arguments starting Monday?
I do. I think tomorrow we're going to get through the 5 additional alternate jurors. And if we have time, we're going to do that Sandoval hearing. So the prosecution has provided notice that if Trump doesn't take the stand, and you and I have talked, I believe he will, you want to bring in some of those previous legal cases, the Jean Carroll defamation trial, the New York civil fraud trial, and try to use that during cross-examination to impeach the former president. And the judge is going to have to decide in advance whether that's fair game or not.
Okay, so you just preempted my next question. You know, what do the parties still need to decide on? You brought up the Sandoval hearing. Let's go into that just a little deeper before we go. So the judge said this, to your point, the hearing will be tomorrow on that very question. The prosecution is requesting to question Trump about past crimes and conduct. That is, if Trump so chooses to testify here. Game out some of those scenarios. What can that look like?
So Sandoval is a case there in New York that says that, you know, if you want to impeach a witness regarding another legal case, you essentially need to get court approval. So, and the reason is this, Andrew, you don't want a trial within the trial. We don't want to be talking about, you know, whether Donald Trump sexually assaulted Jean Carroll. Well, the jury found that he did, but they found that he didn't rape her, you know, or are we going to go through the civil fraud case again? It just really opens up a lot of collateral issues. So the judge needs to decide, does the probative value of attacking Donald Trump's credibility, is it outweighed by the prejudice to him or the confusion of the issues or just wasting the jury's time? So I think likely, if I were to guess, that Judge Merchan is going to keep a lot of this out, keep the case streamlined, even if Trump testifies, and not bring in a lot of this extraneous evidence in.
All right, Neama Rahmani, we'll leave it at that. Always appreciate your insight. We'll probably talk tomorrow, too. Thanks so much, Neama.
I'm sure we will. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, in the meantime here, we do